Today on Tyre Marks, Dave and I are taking out a couple of everyday runabouts, or shopping trolleys if you like. We have a 2008 Mitsubishi Lancer and a 2006 Ford Focus. As you can see, the Lancer is a sedan while the Focus is the hatchback. Both of these vehicles are 5-speed manuals, turning behind 2-litre 4-cylinder engines. They are both front-wheel drive, have anti-lock brakes as standard, and both are available in hotted up turbo versions.
One of the quirks of the car is the bonnet release. It's not in the car, it's outside the car.
If you think that's a little bit strange, come and have a look at this. What I've got under the bonnet of this is actually a Mitsubishi option. It's not a dealer option. This cable here is actually a Mitsubishi option. It's supposed to improve the conductivity of the entire circuit. Now it's connected to the battery, down to the starter motor, and it's an earth over here. When it turned up, the instructions were all in Japanese. The mechanics had to figure out how to put it in from the pictures because they couldn't read the Japanese instructions. Why it's an option, I've no idea. It should be fitted standard. Something else that's a little bit weird, but it's actually quite common on most cars nowadays, is that you get a space saver tyre to save space inside the boot. This car comes with an option of having a full-size tyre, which is a 205 series tyre, but because it sits up about that much higher, what they provide is a platform that goes all inside the floor of the boot to lift it up so you get a nice level floor. Of course, when you put that in, you lose a little bit of space. It's all lifted up. With the Lancer being the newer car, its interior stood out as being the more impressive of the two. As for the drive, well, we thought it would be a good idea to take them out for a realistic comparison drive through the not so high hills of Perth. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't the best. This model Mitsubishi Lancer is actually quite a lot bigger than the last one. The reason is that they've based this platform on the Mitsubishi Outlander. The car is quite roomy inside for what was a small car but now has to be considered a medium-sized car. One thing that's apparent as well is how much distance it is between me and the windscreen. I can't reach out and touch the glass of the windscreen.
So this is a 2006 Ford Focus. Something like this on the used car market would go for about $15,000. So it'd be interesting to compare this to a newer car such as the Lancer. First impressions are great steering. It's quite progressive. It's actually electric, which is surprising when you actually drive it because you wouldn't pick it.
What this weather does give me is a bit of faith in the car. All Mitsubishi Lancers have been fitted with ASC, which stands for Active Stability Control. One of the options you can get with the Mitsubishi Lancer is an alloy gear knob. Very nice. One thing to consider though is when the weather turns hot and sunny, you need to consider having one of these in your car. It's a stubby cooler. The reason you need one is to put it over the gear knob when you're parked out in the sun, because otherwise it burns your hand when you want to change gears. What is noticeable about the Mitsubishi Lancer is how much road noise is coming through the car itself. Normally you associate this amount of road noise with a sports car which has reduced noise deadening and high performance tyres which let out a lot of noise when they're driving on bitumen.
The road noise on this car is pretty loud, especially on something like we're on now, which is a coarse bitumen. We're now getting onto a smooth bitumen. It's a lot quieter.
I like the way the dash is laid out. I like the way the console's laid out as well. It's very simple changing stations on the radio. It's very simple working the aircon controls.
Fairly spacious, very plasticky. You know where your old Eskies went to. Other than that, everything's well laid out, easy to read, in reach, great ergonomics. First thing you notice in the Lancer is that the interior is a generation ahead on styling. There's no denying it. You seem to sit a bit lower in the seat as well. Everything seems to be well placed. Some of the writing on the buttons are a little bit small, but once you get used to them, it's fine. Alright, now it's a manual. It's a Euro model, so that means the indicators are on the left and the wipers are on the right. Handbrake's in the right position. Aircon's on. Mirrors need to be adjusted. And we should be right to go. Indicator. The ride's quite good. There's a dull roar in the background, which you can hear. Well, we've just gone over a smooth road now. But that seems to be a common trait with these smaller cars.
This is actually quite a bit quieter. This is quite a bit quieter than the Lancer.
The vision's pretty good in this. The side mirrors seem to be bloody huge.
The mirrors are a lot smaller, that's noticeable. Those wipers are annoying. You hear the groaning. The ride is a lot firmer too. This actually feels more like a sports car. The pedals are heavier. There's more back pressure on the throttle, definitely more pressure on the clutch. The shift in the gearbox is quite a bit slicker too. The one in the Mitsubishi Lancer is actually quite a bit notchier. That's not a bad thing, it's just a character. This one seems to be a bit slipperier. It's easier to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I prefer it like that. The layout of the console, it's a little bit more complex, more buttony. Pretty simple to work out though. The engine isn't as loud in this car either as the Mitsubishi Lancer. There is more air induction noise though. You don't notice it at all at the moment because there's too much rain pissing down.
In the centre of the two dials there's a LED display which is like an 80s arcade game. It's quite amusing the first time you see it.
The wheelbase definitely feels much shorter on this car than the Mitsubishi Lancer, and that would certainly help. Oh yeah, that certainly does help. I've just noticed something. All the vents are oval shaped, and they're the same oval shape as the Ford emblem. It's okay, I guess.
As you get accustomed to it, the gear shift is quite good. It's just right in where it should be, right at hands full.
I really miss the steering wheel. I hate the European controls where the lights are on the left and the wipers are on the right. Gauges, livable, but very dull. I think I do prefer the more firm foot controls though.
The engine feels a bit perkier in the Lancer. The throttle response is really well calibrated.
After working up a thirst talking to a camera, it was time for me and Dave to pull into the Kalamunda Hotel for some light refreshment and discuss the merits of each car and the class in general.
But how much bigger are these cars going to keep getting?
I think they keep getting bigger until they fill the niche out that's in front of it, and they introduce a new model that goes into right behind it, which is what the original design criteria was. Yeah. And the Focus?
Focus, cheap interior. Plastics are horrible on it.
I think the Mitsubishi is a cheap interior as well, but the design of it is pretty sharp.
You can get away with it when it's a good design, but when you've got a pretty dull, boring design, which is a bit too safe for my liking, and then you've got cheap plastics thrown at it, which easily marks, you know, it looks pretty dated. But you can definitely see why these cars sell. I mean, they're plenty big enough.
Yep.
Why do you need a bigger car?
Well, you don't, and especially now, I'm noticing that parking bays seem to be getting smaller and smaller. Yeah. It's like they crowd that line in an inch every year, and to have a bigger, well, what we call a family size sedan is now really tight in those bays. So a car this size for everyday use makes it pretty common sense to actually buy one.
Definitely, the size is right, the engine's very economical, they're cheaper to buy in the first place, and they hold their value better. Overall, the Focus isn't a bad car, not at all. For the price that you can pick these up for in the second-hand market, they're just a great bargain. But if you need to get a new car, buy the Lancer.
I think that's a little bit strange. Come and check this out for an optional extra from Mitsubishi. This is actually not a dealer option, it's actually a factory option. And what it is bucket.
A bonnet that opens.